All right, welcome. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm Dr. Roney. If it's your first time here, I want to take the opportunity to welcome you. If you're returning, I want to welcome you back. Thank you for your support. Thank you for joining in. As you know, our objective is all about education and information to allow you to have more control over your care. So these cancer conversations, I think, are such a big deal in allowing you the peace of mind to know that you are part of the care, where, you know, we always say in the conventional model that the doctor's the rock star, right? They basically tell you what to do, you do it, and there's not much control on your end there. Here, though, we want to educate you, inform you enough to where you have control, that you know you're actively participating in the healing process, which I think, if you hear me say it all the time, if there's a good plan and the details are really orchestrated well within that plan, then you're going to do well, right? You're going to give yourself the best chance to do well. But the reality is that you're going to have peace of mind knowing that you're doing everything you can. And I think that's really critical. So that's why these cancer conversations, I believe, are so important for the patient. It's the education, the information, and the peace of mind knowing that you're doing everything you can to either help cure your cancer or prevent reoccurrence or whatever your goal might be. I think that's super valuable. So having said that, I do want to introduce our special guest tonight, Leigh Ann Lindsey.
Hello.
So Leigh Ann, her and I have done a lot of podcasts together, right? So Leigh Ann comes from the same mindset as far as from a patient standpoint. I want to mention that. She started here as a patient, right, with Dr. Connealy. And real quick caveat, Dr. Connealy will be up and we will switch seats because Dr. Connealy was her treating physician. And we want to give you her perspective both as a patient, but also she's a clinician as well. So Leigh Ann is really good at EVOX, correct? Now you've done other things, but is that now your main?
That's the whole show right now. So
right?
I do EVOX all day long, 6 days a week, and I absolutely love it.
Now, as you know, right, if you've been with me or Dr. Connealy or anybody here, as far as the clinicians, we know that stress is one of the main factors in creating chronic disease, cancer being one of those. Dr. Connealy says it ad nauseum, that stress is one of the biggest factors. So there's 3 types. There's emotional, chemical, and physical, right? So the chemical stressors are going to be those environmental toxins and things like that, right? Of course, the physical stressors, there's a lot of those. However, the EVOX, if I'm not mistaken, really addresses a lot of the emotional stressors. And I'm going to let Leigh Ann get into it more. However, and of course the whole show is kind of going to revolve around that, correct?
Yeah, the emotional component was huge and is huge, but was a particularly big part in my story for sure. Yeah.
So, and for most. So getting the EVOX part, Dr. Connealy and the doctors here recommend EVOX 100% of the time.
Yep.
Simply because most people, there's some underlying emotional, I'll use the term baggage, right? Some emotional baggage.
Emotional turbulence.
Yeah, turbulence, fair. That's better. Emotional turbulence, that is at least a contributing factor. So when we talk about, in our 4-pillar approach, we talk about pillar 4 heavily. Pillar 4 are those causes. So we get into causes like antigens or foreign invaders. That could be bacteria, it could be viruses, pathogens like candida, which is a fungal infection, parasites. But then we get into, heavy metals, non-metal toxins, mycotoxins from molds, right? These are foreign invaders that get into the tissues. The immune system overreacts to them and then creates inflammation, really. And then that creates damage at the cellular level. That's kind of cancer, right? So those are what we call antigens or foreign invaders. However, then we get into the metabolic part and we get into the emotional part, which again, stress is a huge component as to how it creates a cortisol disruption, high or low, which then creates a hormonal imbalance, which then creates a unfortunate environment for cancer to thrive, right?
Chronic nervous system dysregulation that keeps us in a stress state. There's a whole, just like I think from your 4-pillar approach, there's a whole physiological cascade that can come from chronic infections and hormone imbalances. There's also an entire cascade, an emotional cascade that can come from chronic stress, unresolved experiences, repressed emotions. Absolutely.
So tonight you'll walk through, I assume, not only the great thing is that Leigh Ann's willing to share her experience as far as from a patient standpoint, and then from a clinician standpoint, that perspective as well. And as it relates to EVOX too, right?
Yes, yeah.
I think that's going to be super valuable for everybody to see, because I personally think, and just to let you in a little bit, when we're hiring too, I want to hire people that it takes one to know one. I want to hire people that have had experience with family members with cancer, because they can put the shoe on the other foot. They can really see how it affects not only the person mentally, physically, but the families and so forth. And I think a clinician that has been through it is probably the most valuable resource you could have. That's my opinion. So, and I know Leigh Ann really, really well, just from our experience working together. Phenomenal. Like she gets it. Right. So I think, again, not to oversell, but I think you're going to really enjoy her and Dr. Connealy's interaction tonight. So I'll do my quick version of the 4-pillar, and then I'll let Leigh Ann get into it. And then as soon as Dr. Connealy comes, her and I will switch out. OK, so real quick, as I tell my patients every day about the 4 pillars. Right. And you may have heard it a million times, but it's always worth repeating. The first pillar in a 4-pillar approach should be the labs that are done not only in the conventional model, whether it's an MRI or a CAT scan or ultrasounds or whatever it might be, and the labs, your tumor markers, things like that. But then we want to get into testing circulating tumor cells. Those are the cells that could cleave off the original tumor, that if they're there, the chances of reoccurrence are much higher. So if we test those, and they're not often tested in the conventional model, so again, we want to get deeper into the nitty-gritty, if you will. And if we can do that, then we're going to be able to give you a better chance of reoccurrence, preventing reoccurrence. But not only that, we're going to individualize the care much better. So instead of the cookie cutter, we're going to individualize. So circulating tumor cell, definitely one of those tests that I would have everybody do that has had cancer or has cancer. The second thing, and just as examples, nagalase is an enzyme that the cancer cells secrete that block our immune system from attacking the cancer cell. So if nagalase is up, that's something that we want to know, because if it is up with your cancer, then we want to drive it down to give your immune system a better shot, right? PHI, that's an enzyme that's secreted that basically tells us that your cells are anaerobic or working in low oxygen, right? So one of the, hallmarks of cancer is anaerobic states, or the cells used to be aerobic, where they used a lot of oxygen. Now they're anaerobic, where they use much less oxygen. That low oxygen promotes lactic acid or more acidity. Now, those two are the hallmarks of how cancer thrives. They thrive in a low oxygen, high acidic environment, right? So again, testing those things and determining that helps us then put a plan together to where we can knock those things down to give your body and your immune system a better chance to fight. And we start changing the cellular environment, right? So those are just some examples of the testing that we do in addition to all the other tests that help us individualize a plan, a more comprehensive individualized plan that is more detailed to you, the person, right? So those are the tests. There's way more, but that just gives you an example. Pillar 2, there's 2 parts to Pillar 2, the starve phase of cancer and the kill phase of cancer. So starving cancer, if you've ever heard of repurposed drugs, these are drugs that are used in the medical world, but yet are also used secondarily to block certain pathways that feed the cancer cells. Metformin is one of the most well-known. That's a drug that is used in the diabetic world to help lower blood glucose levels, but also in this repurposed drug cancer world, it blocks some of those feeding pathways to the cancer cell. So there are others. There's some anti-parasitic meds. There's antibiotics. There are statins, etc., that are also used, in order to block or starve the cancer. So that's the starve phase. The kill phase of cancer perhaps is the most important. That could be conventionally chemo, surgery, or radiation. Here we use fractionated chemo, which is a lower dose chemo, usually about 10%, maybe 20% of the normal dose. We just lower the blood sugar levels while we infuse it, and it allows a more targeted effect. So it's like a vacuum. It pulls the chemo right into the cell and helps create that cytotoxic effect, but without the side effects. So the kill phase can be, for a lot of people, the more ammunition, meaning sometimes it's just the reality that patients need the fractionated chemo, and sometimes they might need even more, right? It just depends on your case, the severity, things like that as far as what we recommend. But I will tell you, sitting in the seat downstairs, a lot of patients need that extra juice, right? Would you agree with what you've seen?
But what's great is that you guys have already done that bio-individual testing to determine what is going to be best for them. It's not cookie cutter.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
huge.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Whether it's the RGCC or Garden, we're able to use the data from those tests to find out what chemo agents the cells are most sensitive to, which is great. That's less of a broad brush and more of an individual type of plan, which I think individual medicine is definitely the wave of the future for sure. So that at least gives you an idea of the starve and the kill phase. Now, the kill phase could always also, I should say, include some of these other things. So let me get to pillar 3, which is we'll talk about supercharging the immune system. That's part of pillar 3. Oxygenating the tissues, which I talked about the reason why. Alkalizing the tissues. And I've added one. Biocharging the cell, right? So Leigh Ann
you guys didn't have that when I was here.
Exactly. So this is that new Dr. Tennant. If you've been on for the last few times, Dr. Tennant did the webinar or the cancer conversation on the voltage of the cell. And basically the gist of it is when your cells turn anaerobic and they turn toxic or acidic, your voltage is going to drop. Now, I don't know chicken or the egg. The voltage could drop and then that happens. I'm not really sure. But I know addressing all of those is important. So now we do what they call Mead testing. And Mead testing tests the voltage of the cell. 25 millivolts, minus 25 millivolts is what a healthy cell functions at. In order for it to heal, it should be at minus 50, right? But most of the cancer patients, because of that anaerobic and acidic environment, they're functioning somewhere below that 25 range. A lot of the patients that I've talked to since we've done that and they've done the Mead testing, they're in that teen range. They're like 12, 13, 14, 15, which means if we're going to get healing, we have to boost that voltage. Now, again, simultaneously oxygenating and alkalizing because they all work together. So pillar 3 is immune boosting, right? Vitamin C IV, artisanate, mistletoes, things like that, and supplements like vitamin D, vitamin C, etc. And there's a lot more than that. Plus those other 3 things of oxygenating, alkalizing, and increasing the voltage. Some of those things like vitamin C are also part of the kill phase. So vitamin C, real quick, I know this is lengthy, but vitamin C at high doses, cancer cells lack an enzyme called catalase. So high dose vitamin C in a cancer cell is not converted to good stuff. It's converted to hydrogen peroxide, which is very cytotoxic to the cancer cell. So the point I'm making is we don't just get the kill phase from chemo, surgery, radiation, and or fractionated chemo. We get some of the kill phase and the cytotoxic effect from things like vitamin C and hyperthermia and so forth, right? And there's others. The point I'll make is we want that kill phase to be as robust as possible using potentially I'll say this is the integrative approach, using chemosurgery, radiation, or fractionated chemoimmunotherapy, but then also utilizing things like vitamin C to not only help kill the cancer cell, but also boost your immune system while the chemo is knocking it down. So again, gang, there's a lot more to that and there's a lot more detail, but I want to give you at least the 20,000 foot view of what a philosophy or plan should look like when you're treating cancer so you're not missing anything, right? So far, Pillar 1, the testing. Pillar 2, the starve and the kill phase. Pillar 3, oxygenating, alkalizing, immune boosting, and charging, right? And then pillar 4, we touched on it briefly, which are those causes, right? With emotion, the emotional component, the emotional turbulence, great word, being a high part of that, along with antigens antigens like foreign invaders. And that could be infections, that could be heavy metals, that could be toxins and chemicals and so forth. So again, if they're sitting in a tissue, your immune system is going to attack, right? That attack's going to lead to copious amounts of inflammation. That inflammation is what damages the cells. And when they become damaged, they no longer die off the way they're supposed to. They actually replicate, right, as damaged cells. And that's cancer. So again, change the cell, reduce inflammation, and get rid of the causes. And then if you can do that, and you do it collectively, right? Meaning you're doing the right testing, you're doing the starve and kill phase if you do have active cancer, you're doing the immune boosting and alkalizing and oxygenation and voltage, right? Increasing the voltage. And then over time, working through the causes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you, sitting in the chair that I sit in, which is for years now, and watching that approach, I am going to tell you, I would do that all day, every day, and twice on Sunday for anybody that asks me what I should do or what they should do to treat cancer care, right? Or to treat their cancer or to prevent cancer. I would do exactly that. And I would, again, from a conviction standpoint, I'm convicted because I see the results every day for the patients that go all in and do that. So you're not stuck with a conventional approach that you have no control over, that's only one chapter of a 20-chapter book. The other 19 chapters are the chapters that you want to implement. If you had to do conventional care, okay, sometimes that's absolutely necessary, right? But you want to fill in the other chapters without question of the 4 pillars that we just talked about. And I think that's super important to keep repeating over and over again. What do you think about that part of it?
Yeah, well, it's no stone unturned, which I think oftentimes, I was here covering EVOX for all the patients a few weeks ago, and oftentimes there is this sense of, am I doing the right thing? Did I make the right choice? And what I love about being here at the center is you can look back on your time here and go, I did not leave one box unchecked. I look at everything, and even if I don't necessarily get the results I want, at the end of the day, I can have total peace knowing I did everything within my power.
Well,
and I was given so many tools.
Right. And to that point, I say this a lot. My biggest fear in life, honestly, is regret. So, and I it's just the way my brain works, whether I know I've mentioned this before, I coach baseball, I do different things. I don't want to be unprepared and lose a game because I didn't cross a T or dot an I. So I over prepare. But I enjoy the preparation. It's part of the fun for me, right? The work. I love the work. It's no different here. I want to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed so the patient and their family and us as clinicians can look back and go, we did everything we could. I think there's so much peace there, right? And learning the process and enjoying learning the process of how to get better, I think is, if you can really embrace that part of it, this is cliche, and as an athlete, you'll know what I mean. And Lindsey was a former soccer player, right? Big time.
Current soccer player. Yeah.
All right. Fair. But it's trusting the process, right? So, and it's learning to really enjoy the process. If you can do that, the outcomes typically take care of themselves. So I know that's cliche because you hear that a lot, but I think the people that do the best actually really embrace the process, really enjoy the process, and continue to learn and love that learning. And I think that helps their healing significantly. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that it's just that empowerment piece versus the conventional approach, which I dipped my toe in both experiences and ultimately ended up here because that conventional approach was so jarring for me. But the conventional approach, unfortunately, through no fault of the oncologist, can very much be, you're just unlucky.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing you can do. Here's the cookie cutter treatments. Don't change anything in your life. Don't do any research.
Yeah,
have a good
not
day.
Gonna help. This isn't going to help. That's not going to help. Yeah.
And we know that when you get a diagnosis, when you get a cancer diagnosis, your immune system drops by 60%.
Yeah.
But
Just from the diagnosis?
Just from
hearing
receiving that diagnosis.
Wow.
And so to know that not only are your immune system's dropping, which now creates an environment that's even more prosperous for cancer, you're also given zero tools outside of control. When the message is, this just happened, it's so unlucky, then it's kind of like, well, what the heck can I do? Nothing except maybe these treatments. Whereas versus here, when the message is, let's look at any of the potential physiological and emotional root causes to this, then it's kind of like, oh, maybe there is something in my environment, in my lifestyle that contributed to this. And I think that also is really impactful in addressing future fear, because I see this really often post-cancer when we're in remission, the hypervigilance that comes. But when you give them the tools to say, hey, here's what we need to look out for, here's what we're checking in with every year. I think that can be really supportive in addressing that post-cancer hypervigilance that often comes.
Oh, I think the power is in the knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have more knowledge, if you do your due diligence, if you study, if you listen, that's power. And I think that's peace of mind too. So
1000%.
Anyway, okay, everybody, it's my cue. Dr. Connealy's here. Bye, everybody.
I'm never good with Thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
Arnold.
absolutely. See you, Liz. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi,
See you.
sweetheart.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm amazing.
Hello, everyone. Oh, gosh.
Oh, can you raise your seat
I
up?
have to say, Shep has got,
We're going to raise your seat
A
up.
lot of stuff going on, right?
yes, he's got this, this technology. See, Leigh Ann is an
I'm
Amazon.
too tall. I'm too tall next to her.
Anyway, welcome, everyone. I'm excited that all of you guys are here, and we are excited to share Leigh Ann's experience with Leigh Ann and I about 2 weeks ago, was it, that we did we did a whole podcast because we wanted to really expose her story, because here she is, only this young person, and going through such a very, very serious diagnosis and situation, and trying to understand why, where, when, and how. And so with that, Leigh Ann, let's talk about you and your story.
Yeah, well, I'll give kind of the broad brushstrokes, and then I'm sure we'll dive into it a little bit more. But I think what's really pertinent about my story is actually the way it begun, because it was very unconventional in that in 2019, I think it was October, November 2019, I woke up in the middle of the night with a blinding pain in my right breast. I'm a deep sleeper. The fact that the pain was so intense that it woke me up in the middle of the night was very odd to me. But I went to my general practitioner. She did some palpating and ultimately said, you know what, it's probably your gallbladder. And really just set me on my way. There was no further inquiry. There was no other questions asked. And I think this is the power of intuition, because my gut was just saying, you need to look at this. Don't let this go, which is also very unusual for me, because I tend to be the one that's like, do I really have to go to the doctor? I'll be fine. Let me give it a couple weeks. It'll probably go away. So the fact that even kind of within my soul, there was such an urgency around this really told me a lot. So I had never had a mammogram before, never done anything related to breast cancer before. And then I just decided to do an ultrasound. And sure enough, the ultrasound picked up on a 2 millimeter lump in my right breast, which is also something worth noting, because the practitioner who did my ultrasound had said, you have really dense breast tissue, and this is such a small lump that this wouldn't have even shown up on a traditional mammogram. So again, your intuition was right on point there, telling you to go get the ultrasound. And I think, honestly, by chance, by God, by the universe, whatever it is, I found you, and you were one of the first people I worked with. And we dove in right away with all the testing. Is there anything you want to butt in there with?
Right. Well, we, because at 25, I think, first of all, she was scared to death. And so just dealing with that emotional component, and not to mention maybe her emotional unrest over the last 25 years, but just the diagnosis itself is a tremendous undertaking. And then so of course I do this, extreme array of testing, And then we did some more imaging.
Yeah.
And then we did circulating tumor cell testing by the RGCC. And then she just started. We did bioenergetic testing with Molly, bioimmune testing.
Thermography, ultrasound, a lot of diagnostic, MRI, biopsy, thermography, bioimmune. I'm sure there's something I'm missing in there.
No, that's about right. That's about right.
But something I do really want to point out here is I went and did the biopsy with an outside source, a surgeon that I ended up not ultimately working with, and we'll touch on that, I'm sure. And the initial biopsy, they did not catch any cancer cells. And I love the input you had on this, which was just because that one little snippet of that tumor didn't have cancer cells doesn't mean there aren't cancer cells in another piece. Maybe they just missed them. But we also really took into consideration the fact that every other test I had done, there was a red flag in every single test. Mm-hmm. And this was really profound for me because of two things really that you had said to me. One of which is younger individuals, their cells are multiplying at a much faster rate, which is why it's so important to jump on it and not be lackadaisical. But my general practitioner that I saw didn't even take me seriously. She said it was my gallbladder. But I think that there would have been a lot of other doctors who were like, oh, your biopsy's clear. See you in who knows how many years. And it just would have been put to bed right there.
Right. And that's what I see a lot. The last patient I saw before I came up here was a 33-year-old. Mm-hmm. And she had sore throats for 2 years. And the doctors just kept giving her antibiotic. Mm. And then she was reading on her own to say, like, oh my God, why would I have chronic sore throat? And she read that maybe it might be thyroid cancer. Well, sure enough, she went to her doctor and said, I need a thyroid ultrasound. I need these blood tests. And the doctor said, no, you don't need those testing. Your blood test looks fine. She goes, no, I am telling you, this is what you're going to do. And sure enough, so the patient really found her own thyroid cancer. And so it's very, very sad because, now she has more extensive situation going on. And so anyway, so any symptom, take it seriously and just make sure, go to a doctor who's going to listen to you, number one. Number two is going to, explore every possibility to make sure that symptom is not a thing to be concerned about. And gallbladder, breast, I'm not sure, it's not even. And why didn't you order an abdominal ultrasound to look at the gallbladder and the liver? So, but always get to the bottom of a situation. Never just go, oh, it's nothing and I don't need to deal with it. But always, because I always talk to patients about how did this all start. And patients will tell me, well, I had bright red blood, and they said it was a hemorrhoid, and it wasn't a hemorrhoid, it was colon cancer. Mm-hmm. So I hear that quite a lot. So I tell people, like, just do the test. And most doctors in the conventional world, they kind of do superficial. They look at, the external part of the car and not under the hood, the internal part. And they always think if you're 25, oh, you're not sick. You can't be sick. Well,
certainly not cancer.
Right. And so because I used to say for years that patients had a warranty until they're 40, and now I can't say that. And now I would say in the last 2 years, we've had an exponential increase in young people with cancer. So we have to be now, all doctors need to be extremely proactive in working up a patient. And now that we have the tools today to work up a patient, we really have to do that. And so anyway, so let's talk about, because her surgery was canceled, so why don't you talk about that? It was during COVID, and so.
Yes, well, it took some time even to just get an MRI scheduled because of COVID. I think it took me like 3 months even to get that scheduled. And the initial surgeon I was working with, it was about 8 months later. I was literally in the hospital room, in my gown, all hooked up. They were about to put me under. And then my COVID test came back and they were like, oh, you have COVID. Okay, you got to go. Here's your clothes. Put them on. Leave immediately, please.
Wow.
And so ultimately I didn't end up working with that surgeon, not because of that particular instance, but he was just kind of like, I had done some genetic testing with him, which I tested positive for the ATM gene. And according to him, he had said this makes you about 80% more likely to get breast cancer over the course of a lifetime. And really his recommendation was at 25 to have a double mastectomy. And I was like, I don't know, man, that seems a little extreme to me.
Right.
That, again, we're not looking at any other factors. We're not doing blood tests. We're not doing gut tests. It's just take them off. And that was really jarring for me and didn't sit well with me. And not that everyone needs to follow that same route, but that didn't sit well with me personally. So I ultimately ended up shifting to a surgeon here in Orange County. And I think it was June or July of 2021 that I ultimately had the tumor removed. Mm-hmm. Of course, that whole year in between, I was doing all the treatments, continuing, checking up on things. But did you want me to share some of the treatments I was doing here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And why don't you, and talk about you want to do your slides?
Oh, you want to pull the slides up?
Yeah.
Here. So getting into some of the treatments, I think I did almost everything under the sun that you guys had here at the time. Now, you've up-leveled a lot in the last 3 years, which there's a lot of treatments you have now that I want to do, even just for fun to try them out. But lymphatic massage, sauna, IVs, vitamin C, 21-day cleanse, the turbosonic, EVOX, the F-scan and the Firefly for gut infections, the bioimmune survey, the detox and oxygen baths, at-home stuff like coffee enemas, detox baths, the 21-day cleanse. Mm-hmm. I think just about everything under the sun.
Right. Exactly.
That we could look at.
Right. And then why don't you tell them, though, I always recommend to every single patient that we have to do emotional recalibration, okay? Because I always tell patients that every emotional experience is stored as an electromagnetic frequency. And we all go through life and we have curveballs and detours, and we've got to frame these unfavorable emotional conflicts into a favorable frequency in our system. And so why don't you talk about that? Because I think now that Leigh Ann has gone through it and is on the other side, I think you had a major discovery with yourself.
Oh my goodness. So many major discoveries that continue to this day because the work is definitely continuous. But speaking to EVOX Therapy, which is something that you recommend all of your cancer patients do here, I loved emotional work. I loved being introspective and piecing myself together, but I had never personally found an external resource for emotional wellness that really lit me up and was super impactful. And from the very first EVOX session that I did here, it was like epiphanies through the roof, immediate shifts in my everyday life and how I was showing up with myself and with other people. And I was just like, this is unbelievable. I need to learn more about this. So of course I was doing it as a patient on a weekly basis myself. And then, we know the story that a year later I got the technology and got certified, and now I do this with clients all day long. But what I want to speak to, if I can, is I think the biggest epiphany, the biggest light bulb that went on for me of how the emotional wellness could be affecting my physical health, which is about spring 2021. It had been a year of doing testing and treatments full force. And I just woke up one day and realized, okay, why do I still feel awful? Achy, fatigued, unmotivated. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I had kind of another epiphany where I was like, there really is no physiological reason I should be feeling this way. And that made me pause and start to go, okay, if there is an emotional root to feeling so poorly every day, what might that be? And in asking myself that question, what really surfaced for me is how does this fatigue serve me? How does it protect me? And I think what came out of that is I had realized that for me, a feeling of unwell, that fatigue, that lethargy, it had really become my scapegoat. And I realized not only was it a little bit of a self-sabotage for me from an emotional perspective, what was going on deep down in my subconscious was, if I don't feel well, I will always have an out.
Right.
If I don't feel well, the expectations on me are going to be way less. And of course, that's not even the root. That opens up a whole other cascade of questions of, why am I afraid of expectations? Do I not believe I'm capable of meeting those expectations? Do I not believe I'm capable of setting boundaries, et cetera, et cetera? But the ultimate point that I want to make there is, from that moment on, I woke up every day, instead of, if I did feel off, instead of going, well, I guess it's going to be an off day, my body's not up for it today, I woke up and went, if I'm feeling off, let me do everything within my power to feel better. And I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, it would clear within 10 minutes of doing my morning walk and my morning meditation. And so that was just such a clear light bulb, though, of, after a year of doing so many things, still feeling unwell, it wasn't that I hadn't hit the physiological root cause. I think we had. I just hadn't hit the emotional root cause to that.
Right. And people always say to me, no, I don't have any stress. No, I don't have any emotional imbalances. And then I say, look, just do 1 EVOX, and then you can tell me you don't have anything. And then when they always do the EVOX, it's always revealed. And then they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much better I am. And so always, always, it's like, and it's the patients who, there's other patients that go, sure, I get it. But a lot of patients say, I don't have anything. And I'm like, I don't know how you can't have something. I mean, everyone has something. And then who you are is not just from your mom and dad. It goes back many generations. And so, and no one knows how their life was when they were 1 year old. And so it's so important that we really get the microscope out when we have anything. We're talking about cancer, but here we treat everything from human optimization to heart disease to autoimmune to cancer. I mean, it doesn't matter what the label is, because we still have to, lift up the hood and examine every single thing and get the body in the best homeostasis we can possibly get it. Because disease is happening because there are many different things going on, whether it's emotional, whether it's nutrient deficiency or deficiencies, or toxicity, or bugs, and which were viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. And so you've got to clean out, you gotta clean out your soil and make sure that you can grow nice, healthy cells that take care of you every day. That's why just taking a drug or doing a little surgery doesn't heal you and take care of you. So what's the next slide? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So when Leigh Ann came in, I always like to do bioimmune survey. So you have your acupuncture points on your fingers and toes that correspond to every organ in your body. And so these acupuncture points are like a string of pearls or a wire to an organ or gland. And it will tell me what could be interrupting the energy meridian. And so we will give you a program to do and then get checked in 3 or 4 months and see how much progress you've made. So most people usually need to do a cleanse because we're living in, bad water, air, soil, food, everything is not so great today. So I would say we need to regularly detox. Now, I know we had to ask Leigh Ann to do the 21-day purification cleanse, which is a very effective tool. Then as an adjunct to mammography or ultrasound or MRI, we do thermography on the breast. So thermography is a thermal image that detects vascularity. So cancer is a vascular situation, vascular means blood supply. So that will help me ascertain in another dimension what's going on, because ultrasound is lumps and bumps. So as opposed to a thermography, which is vascularity.
Something I'll just add there quickly is another doctor I had seen was basically telling me, don't waste your time with thermography. It's not diagnostic. You can't get any information from that. And to your point, maybe it's not diagnostic. Maybe we can't do a thermograph and go, okay, you have cancer, but it's another stone that we don't want to leave unturned that can tell us if there's any red flags, that can tell us if something is brewing.
Right, that's correct. And actually, people can have thermography, and it can be forecasting way far in advance of it detected on a mammography or ultrasound.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's another dimension of imaging, and actually been around since 1956, so a very, very long time. So, and then there's the F-scan. So the F-scan is a device that assesses the abnormal frequencies of microorganisms. So it could be parasites or mold or yeast, and then we use the frequency and use with photonic lights. We put it over your body, and that destroys the organism. It's a very effective tool that one of our practitioners brought in here. He and his father developed it and brought it in, and it's used all over the United States now. And then the RGCC is a lab that's in Switzerland and Greece, and they do cancer testing. They do liquid biopsies, and they do a very detailed cancer testing. And so that they will look at assessment of circulating tumor cells. They will look at what works on circulating tumor cells. Circulating tumor cells are responsible for 95% of metastasis, and only natural things for the most part. There are a few medicines that work on circulating tumor cells, but that test the efficacy of the natural things that work on it. But it also will do this very detailed analysis of all different kind of growth factors, all different very specific characteristic features of the cancer. So it helps the practitioner know the different things that we might want to address with each person's cancer. So it's been around for, I don't know, maybe 25 years now, RGCC. It's used all over the world in many countries. Japan uses it, all over Europe they use it, all over the United States they use it. And so so it's another tool for us to evaluate patients. Blood test, a typical blood test is a chemistry panel looking at your electrolytes, kidney and liver, and a CBC, which looks at your white count and your hemoglobin to make sure you're not anemic, and then your blood indices, the blood cells in your blood. And then a doctor may order a lipid panel, and then that's about
I know we did Nutri-Eval, we did the estrogen
I'm just saying
one.
A typical doctor,
right.
But here we do hormone testing, we do C-reactive protein, vitamin D, hemoglobin A1C, all tests that should be done in every patient because, for example, C-reactive protein is a nonspecific marker for inflammation. Well, everyone needs to know their hemoglobin A1C and they need to know their CRP, because if you have high hemoglobin A1C, you're predisposed to cancer. If you have high CRP, that's inflammation, that's fire, that's the red light on the dashboard of the car. So we need to figure that out. So we do very extensive, I do tumor markers on patients. In every single cancer patient, I always do tumor markers. And so our blood test is very expansive. It's spelled out very good in the book, Cancer Revolution. And so so patients can really order tests themselves. And I've had lots of patients order a lot of testing based upon my book. So, and then MRI, we're talking about breast in this situation. Every suspicious lesion is usually evaluated with mammography, ultrasound, and MRI. And so that is a gold standard for patients with breast. And then the biopsy. So the gold standard is getting a biopsy, because then they have to delineate what specifically pathology it is. And so I've had many a patient, though, who've had biopsies in Leigh Ann's situation where it says, oh, that, there wasn't anything, and I said, well, that's good, but maybe they didn't access the diseased or pathological tissue. But we, we'll go with the good news, but let's do the circulating tumor cells to determine if there is something. And so I've had patients with colon cancer that had their biopsy was negative. I've had several breast cancer patients, I can think of 3 or 4 right now, who had surgeries that they said there was nothing, but the patients have circulating tumor cells. So we always have to go that extra step to evaluate and take a deep dive with the patient, because this is a patient's life. We have to be proactive, preventive, and very individualized and personalized with each patient, because this is their life. And if we can prevent cancer, that's probably one of the most important diseases, because heart disease, you can fix it. Unfortunately, we have stents and emergency treatment, but you still have to do all the other work, the emotional work, the eating work, and all the blood tests there's a whole set of individual blood tests. But with cancer, it's so important that we prevent cancer, and then once a patient has been diagnosed, really, really focus on changing that terrain in the soil so that the cancer doesn't come back. Because if you don't change the unwell organism that the cancer came in, the cancer is going to come back. And that's not just from doing a surgery, chemo, and radiation, because surgery is injurious and immunosuppressive. Chemotherapy is injurious and immunosuppressive, and so is radiation. So we have to undo the damages that all these things have done. So anyway, nothing is, as I always tell every patient, nothing's easy, quick, fast. The miracle that we get to live in is a miracle, and we got to steward it and direct it and guide it and take care of it as if it is a miracle that we get to live in each day.
What I'll just add to that is, and I can't stress it enough, how grateful I am that you took everything seriously. Because I really do believe, I had been written off so many times, basically because according to conventional cancer testing, to use the analogy, like the house wasn't burning down. and over here at the cancer center, we're not just looking for a blazing wildfire, you're looking for sparks. And to that point, even though the biopsy was technically clear, every other single test I had done was a red flag. I had increased vascularity from the thermography. The ultrasound showed tissue that was growing irregularly. It really looked like cancerous tissue. I had done the SEP with John, and the polarity of my cells was reversed, which is also something that was fascinating. That was one of my favorite treatments that I did here, for sure. I had gut infections. So my blood tests, weren't great either. The RGCC came back positive. And you looked at all of that and you were like, I don't care if the biopsy's negative. Something is brewing, and I am not going to turn a blind eye. We're going to take this seriously. And I can't even say how grateful I am, because I don't know, maybe right now, maybe 3 years later, the house wouldn't be burning down yet, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, I really do think it would have turned into a wildfire.
Right, exactly. And that's what doctors, we just have to be first of all, listen to the patient, but second of all, be so proactive with the patient. Because right now, unfortunately, we're living in a crisis of dis-ease and disease, and we're not promoting and creating health in each patient. And everyone deserves to have good health. So let's take some questions, Leigh Ann.
Okay, let's stop this share.
So,
how many EVOX sessions you would normally recommend? Well, I'll answer that as I'm scrolling up. I know normally here at the Cancer Center, 5 is a minimum that you would recommend.
Right. Usually we recommend 5. And how many do you normally recommend, Leigh Ann?
Yeah, I normally recommend anywhere from 4 to 8 sessions, especially when you're just getting started. I think it's like anything. If you can do them kind of in a little bit of a bucket and do them on a weekly basis, you're going to see shifts so much faster. It's like if you're going to the gym and you only went once a month, you might see some progress, but it'll take a little bit of time. Same thing with EVOX. If you go on a weekly basis, the shifts that are going to be happening are going to be immense and immediate for sure.
Right. Every patient is, they always tell. So I always tell people, I started studying stress and emotional conflict about 28 years ago, and learned from that point to where we are today. And psychotherapy is good when you have someone you need to talk to, but our patients, they're sick right now, and when I want to get them well very quickly. So that's why I use EVOX as this tool that quickly creates shifts and makes such a difference immediately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. What is the best way to seek out assessment at the clinic? I'm currently 5-year remission, stage 2 breast cancer. So best way that she can get here.
Right. So the best thing to do is just set up an appointment with our team, and at the end we'll share telephone numbers and everything. And you're 5 years out, so you want to make sure that you are on track. Like yesterday, I had a gentleman who's 42 years old, and he had testicular cancer when he was 20. And now it's all back stage 4 because they all told him, oh, you've surpassed 10 years, you're good. And I'm like, well, no, there's no finish line to health. So, and when you have cancer and you're young, it doesn't matter. You've got to be checking. He should have been getting an annual exam, checking markers, checking extensive blood work, doing all the testing and checking for circulating tumor cells. Because now he has a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old, and now he's already done chemotherapy and that's not working. And so now he's at a crossroads. And so I always tell people, so this is a good question. If you've had cancer, you want your whole life is how never to get cancer again, what Leigh Ann is doing. Like, she's got to live a life and checking that she doesn't get cancer again. So living a preventive, proactive, personalized lifestyle. So you just need to get an assessment, and we see so many patients that did not do that, and they are here with, very big situations. So I would encourage you to call and speak to Vicki and TJ about getting in and, listening to these cancer conversations, arming yourself with education. She and I were constantly educating ourselves all the time because we want to be better at what we're doing. And so the more that we learn, and like she said, we've added different treatments here since Leigh Ann has been coming, and because we're fine-tuning this human biological system. And there's 1.2 million PubMed articles written online. There's something new coming out, changing all the time. So we want to be to the most updated medicine possible.
Okay, is Nagalase a good starting point for testing?
Well, I always tell people, because people ask me, well, what test? And I'm like, well, Nagalase is just, 1/100th of what you should do. So Nagalase is not only elevated in cancer, but it can be elevated in chronic viral infections, heart disease. So Nagalase is just one good test because there's so much other, your body is this beautiful miracle of 50 trillion cells, 100,000 chemical reactions taking place per second. So there is a lot to go on. If you just go on LabCorp and look at all the tests available to you, you could be doing testing, for a very, very long time just with LabCorp. So you need not just Nagalase, you need very, very comprehensive testing. So Nagalase is just one thing, but it's not just for cancer, it's for other diseases.
Okay, next one. This one's a little long. I have not slept well for over 20 years. I had a lot of stress at home and at work for many of those years. I ended up with breast cancer. Currently on letrozole. I am still not sleeping well, so my blood sugar is always in the 90s and low hundreds with A1C of 5.8. I have worked with a sleep specialist twice with CBT and no real change. Sleep study shows no sleep apnea. I want to stop the letrozole, which I have been taking for 9 years, as I am not sure the benefits outweigh the risks, but I'm scared because I feel the elevated blood sugar from not sleeping would be detrimental. I'm really desperate for any suggestions to help.
Right. So she has a history of breast cancer. She's on letrozole, so that's a long time to be on letrozole. Usually it's 5 years. I know the new studies say 10, but there's a great book that you can read, that you should read, written by a conventional gynecologist, and it's called Estrogen Matters. And so at this point, I'm not sure how old you are, but letrozole is not the only factor. That's one of many factors why you have breast cancer. And so you need, just like the other patient, you need really good comprehensive blood testing, looking at your organs, looking at your CBC, looking at your thyroid, looking at your sugar, which you already know is high. So high sugar is patients with high sugar are predisposed to cancer. So that the doctor should be getting that down. You can start with a ketogenic eating. You may need berberine or metformin or something to bring it down. But you shouldn't be letting that go, because when you have elevated blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C is a reflection of your sugar over 90 days, but it's also a reflection of aging. What happens is we get something called cross-links, because hemoglobin A1C is advanced glycation. What it is inside wrinkling in the body, and you get that. You get wrinkling in the body. So this is not good for your body. So everyone should know 2 numbers you should know, or 3 numbers: vitamin D, your hemoglobin A1C, and C-reactive protein. So if your doctor doesn't do them now, make sure your doctor has done them and knows. So an ideal vitamin D would be about 50. A C-reactive protein ideal should be less than 0.5, and a hemoglobin A1C should be about 5.0 to 5.2. It sounds like you need to do EVOX for stress and reprogramming, so I would highly recommend that. There are some things for sleep. You should probably, because it sounds like at your age, you probably would benefit for taking melatonin, which is an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer. And I'd start right now with 10 milligrams and take 1 or 2 at night before bed. But you got to work with someone who can help you, because sleeping pills are not the answer for you. Sleeping pills are very detrimental to the system. They decrease the immune system. Also, they give you artificial sleep. Number 3, they cause respiratory depression. So taking sleeping pills is not the answer. So it sounds like there's lots of things. I would read the book, Cancer Revolution, so you can start saying, okay, am I getting my life and my personal home sanctuary in the right, that it has the right environment for healing.
There's 2 things I'll add to that really quickly. One is I love to look up the Chinese horary clock, which is when our organs are active. We know that when we're sleeping, it's a primary phase of detox for us. So oftentimes if we have a heavy toxic burden, our sleep isn't great. But just like sleep is a great time of detox for contaminants and physiological things, it's also a time of emotional detox. So a question I would be asking myself is, what emotional burden, what emotional turbulence can I not detox? Can I not let go of? Is my mind looping on? That is disallowing me from being able to fully rest. That's my 2 cents on that.
Right.
Okay, next question.
I like the way you talk about the turbulence, because it is the turbulence, and we just... I had a new patient this morning, and she was just diagnosed. She's only 40 years old, with 4 children, never been sick, and has stage 4 colon cancer. And then she said, I said, well, what's been your stress over the last 10 years? And she said, I've just now really, since I've been diagnosed, I've really just first examined my life. And so we aren't living consciously. We're just doing. And we're not being. And we need to really take a moment of pay attention to what we are thinking, pay attention to what we are doing, right?
Yeah.
And she has 4 kids, and she's married, and got to do this, and got to be on the school board and everything. But we got to think about, like, what are we really thinking? What is she programming in herself every day? So Anyway.
Okay, next question. What is the value of IVC without cancer or NED?
Okay, so IV vitamin C, if you go into orthomolecular medicine website, we talk about the vitamin C. There's so many great books. The biggest expert that really started this and pioneered the value of vitamin C was Linus Pauling, who got the Nobel Prize for the invention of the chemical bond. And so I tell people vitamin C is the antidote for everything. So if you're sick, vitamin C is great. If you have heavy metals, it's a chelator. If you have toxicity, it's a neutralizer of toxicity. If you have immune system problem, it's phenomenal to help the immune system. Linus Pauling said he took 16, 18 grams. He didn't develop prostate cancer till he was like 93. And so vitamin C is just one of those beautiful things. Plus, we are the most stressed society now, and we are the only mammals who do not make our own vitamin C. Every other animal makes endogenously their own vitamin C. But vitamin C is very, very good as a pro-oxidant in cancer, because what it does, it helps make hydrogen peroxides that kills the cancer cells. So it's a very, very good, very, very good thing for like people who are sick with like mono or upper respiratory or pneumonia. It's phenomenal for that. But for our cancer patients, we give it to all of our cancer patients. Now, I don't know if you need IV vitamin C. You said you have a scan of NED, means no evidence of disease. But I always tell patients, it's not what we see, it's what we don't see. So if you have a scan that shows no evidence of disease, that means you've got to go look at your terrain and your soil to make sure you have an uninhabitable soil for cancer or for bugs. So this is the time, because it's if you've had cancer, it's hard to get a no evidence of disease. So this is the time to take charge and responsibility and advocate for yourself and get to all the root causes that brought on that perfect storm to create cancer.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Do you use fenbendazole for cancer?
So fenbendazole is a anti-parasitic medication. There's about 310 drugs that help starve cancer that have documentation. Fenbendazole is one, but we use an array of different anti-cancer or starving cancer drugs. Fenbendazole is one, ivermectin is one, metformin is one, Celebrex is one, doxycycline. There's many of them. So we use an array, and I always tell people, if I have patients with stage 4 cancer, I've got to have as many arrows in my quiver. So starving cancer with drugs is part of our protocol if the patients need it. Now, if a patient has stage 1, they most likely will not need repurposed drugs for cancer. But in certain situations, especially stage 4, I won't just rely on the chemotherapy to get rid of cancer cells. I will rely on IV vitamin C and IV artemisinin, maybe IV DCA, some of their other IVs to help with the cancer, along with the chemotherapy, along with repurposed drugs. So to answer your question.
Okay. Next question says, hi, Leigh Ann, did you have surgery before treatment? Hello. No, I didn't. I actually, and I think this was more because of COVID, my surgery was delayed for an entire year. So I had a year's worth of treatments before I even went into that surgery. And ultimately, through the decision with Dr. Connealy, we decided, even with all of the treatments we're doing, we still want to get this tissue out of the body. But it did come about a year later.
Right.
Okay. Can you explain the MEAD?
So the MEAD stands for Meridian Energy Assessment Device. So all of our cells have voltage. And what is voltage? Voltage is energy, just very much like a battery. And so we are checking the meridians. The acupuncture meridians are actually points on your body or areas on your body that actually are lines of energy. And so we are checking those energy output that coming through these meridians. And so we assess it because it's going to look at the overall voltage of the body. So if you don't have voltage, the cells cannot take care of you.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Okay, what is the right thing to watch out for if someone has high APOB, the small sticky IDL cholesterol, and plaque in an artery in the neck, but actual arteries for heart had zero plaque? Is high APOB cholesterol related to diet or more so other factors? Any solution or specific things to look out for?
Oh, wow. So, well, first of all, you don't want to just be looking at that particular marker. You want to make sure that, first of all, get the good testing. You need diagnostic testing. I usually have my males have a heart scan, which is a calcium score of the vessels feeding the heart at age 45, and women will have one after menopause. Then I like to check for carotids, because that's a different blood vessel. The carotids are the big blood vessels in the neck. So I will have the patients do that also. But you need to be checking all the parameters of the heart. So that would be a plaque X blood test. That would be checking homocysteine. That would be checking C-reactive protein. That would be checking hemoglobin A1C. That would be checking uric acid, since uric acid elevations are contributing to heart disease. We want to get rid of, bugs, because there are, unfortunately, influence of microorganisms that can be in the plaque of an artery. So we want to make sure that patients don't have infections that can be just from their teeth alone. They can have, the teeth can go to the heart. So you want to eradicate chronic infections. And then it depends on, I have to look at your lipid panel, a very broad spectrum of your lipid panel. And so, so I need a lot more information than just that, okay? Statins, are typically given to patients with elevated cholesterol, but we found in the most recent reports in atherosclerosis and JAMA that statins really do not save lives and do not really do anything for heart disease. And I always ask everyone, has heart disease increased or decreased in the last 20 years? You can answer that yourself. And so we know that statins are not the panacea of getting rid of your heart disease, and statins cause problems with your liver. They also have problems with your brain. Also, they increase your blood sugar. And and they deplete your coenzyme Q10. So you need to look for other things to help your abnormal lipoproteins than just a medication, because there aren't any drugs that I've seen really help the patient. And I always tell people, how does one drug prevent a perfect storm like that? I've never seen that, okay? It's really the actual work that the patients do that changes their future, not taking one drug. And you have to also remember that every drug that you take is poisoning a normal biochemical process in your body. And so you're basically stealing energy, robbing Mary to pay Paul. So I believe in supporting the system and using natural things to change, again, the biochemistry of the body.
Mm-hmm. Love it. What can you do to help have a lower risk of getting cancer? We could spend an hour on that alone.
Right.
I mean, read The Cancer Revolution.
Right.
That's a great starting point.
That would give you you have a lot of action items in The Cancer Revolution, literally. And that's really for any disease.
And it's not, just to be clear, in case the audience doesn't know, it's not just a book for, I've been diagnosed with cancer, now let me read this. It really is, Dr. Connealy, you did such a good job of going, hey, if you're concerned about this, here's the tests you should do, here's some supplement. It's so specific. So that is for sure a great starting point.
Right. And that can apply to any disease. I mean, we talk about cancer, but any disease process, I talk about sleep, I talk about water, I talk about eating, I talk about toxins. So all the things that we all need to be aware of. And I would say the most important thing is setting your mind to a PMA. A positive mental attitude every single day. And that's not easy to do.
It's not?
It's not. I don't care everything I know and try to do, and I know Leigh Ann too, it is something that's challenging on a regular basis. And so, because we revert to who we were. And so we've got to constantly, I'm excited about my healing potential today. And I am going to be in charge. I'm the architect of my thoughts and architect of my destiny. And I have to establish that. And I have to set my mind. And then we have to reset it during the day, because you veer off, because there's about 25,000 thoughts a day, something like that. And so those thoughts are like happening, and we've got to be in charge and conscious of what we're thinking, saying, and doing.
Yeah, and it's not just emotional bypass. It's not positivity as emotional bypassing. It's choosing to be positive. But if you feel that negativity, that lethargy, whatever it is, creeping up again and again, that's when we need to ask those questions. What is going on inside of me? Where is the dis-ease in my mind, body, and spirit that keeps putting me in this negative mood, etc.?
Right.
For sure. Okay, what was your RGCC circulating tumor cell number? This was 3 years ago, but if I recall, and they measure by the million, right? Is that correct?
It's
I think it was like 3.4 something. But is that million? I don't remember.
No, it's 3 cells per 5 cc's.
Okay. So I do remember you saying, you had a patient come in who had like 13.
Yes.
Which was super high.
Super
but I don't
high.
know. I actually don't remember that 3 number. Was that more standard?
Yeah. Well, I would say most people fall in the range of between 2 and 5. Okay. I've had patients be in the 6, 7, 8. And then, of course, I have had some patients over the 10. So ideally, the lower the better. So 1 to 5 is low, or below 5 is ideal. But again, I don't want anyone to get stuck just on the circulating tumor cells, because that's just one dimension. That would be just focusing on your heart or just focusing on your liver. But every one of your organs works in synergy with one another. So you have to fix all the organs, and you have to have all the cells cooperating, because they all work in this synergy and harmony that is beyond our comprehension. So don't focus on just circulating tumor cells. That's just one of the many hundreds of tests that we check.
Okay, a couple more here, Shep. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to do, I was diagnosed in September 2022 with stage 4 liver, lung, colorectal, and bone cancer. What is the best treatment for bone cancer? I am at 90% reduction on the other cancers. I am on a plant-based protocol.
Well, everything that we were talking about, make sure that your lifestyle is well. And then also I would use repurposed drugs. I would do immune enhancement. I would make sure your tissues are alkaline instead of acidic, because cancer is an acidic thing. I'd make sure, you get rid of all the bugs. You've got to, I would be doing specialty IVs. I would be having the doctor checking your immune system, doing a natural killer cell panel, and probably more importantly, a functionality of your natural killer. So again, everything is changing, not just eradicating the disease, but transforming the terrain so that you have an anti-cancer environment. So again, you would need to, really look at all your nutrients, look at your toxins, look at everything. You can't, when you go to a car dealership, you don't buy a part of a car, you get the whole car, right? Because let's say if it's one wheel is missing, you can't drive the car. If the engine's missing, you can't drive the car. If a car door is missing, you can't. Just think about every single part is important. So you can't look at the body in piecemeal. You got to look at it as it's this one entire biological system, and every single thing needs to be addressed. And we have to be creating health as well as eradicating the disease, whether it's with chemotherapy or surgery. And like I said, those processes are injurious and immunosuppressive. So we can't just be attacking and declaring war on the disease. We've got to be supporting the patient and elevating every aspect of the patient while we're also getting rid of the cancer with maybe medications that maybe need to be utilized. So we're going to take one more question. So in detail, the EVOX.
Great. Yeah. Could you please describe what EVOX is in detail? Sure. So I'll give you the quick explanation of it. But just to break down the technology, EVOX is a combination of two different things. The first is something called voice mapping, and then the second is the biofeedback. So we know all day long, whenever we're talking, there are measurable tones in our voice that correlate to emotions. So what we're doing with the voice mapping part of EVOX is, as we're talking about a topic, we're measuring the tones in the voice to see what emotions are imbalanced in relation to the topic we're discussing. Then we go into the biofeedback. So once we've identified some imbalanced emotions, we're outputting frequencies into the body that have been found to help support the balancing and the release of those emotions. That's really the nitty-gritty of the technology. For me, in my practice, I also bring a couple different lenses to the table. I really look at emotional healing through the lens of the subconscious. Oftentimes we're looking at what might be some repressed emotions, what might be some unresolved experiences or trauma. We're bringing in nervous system support. We're bringing in somatic experiencing. So it's very all-encompassing, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a taste of what EVOX is. And of course, on the cancer site, on my site, you can definitely learn a lot more about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for, being a part of this cancer conversation and educating yourself about everything, because this is what needs to change. Cancer is 1 in 2 people and growing exponentially. And we all have to work together to help one another be the best version of ourselves, and sharing these with your friends, your family, your other loved ones, so they can change their lives, whether they have cancer or don't have cancer, and they just want to get healthy. We're talking about fundamental actions that you can take place to get healthy. And this is what needs to happen in America and around the world today, because unfortunately, most people are sick, and we should be saying most people are well and healing and thriving with their health. And that's where we should be in 2023 with what we know. And that is completely possible. So I would encourage each and every one of you to take charge of your health, take inventory of your health, work and partner with someone who can help you get there, and encourage others to do the same. Because believe it or not, we are all individually intra and interconnected with one another. And so the better that each of us is, the better our entire world community is. So I want a patient ask about patient inquiries. They have, it's 949-867-6374. The supplement store, if there's something that you heard me talk about tonight, it's 949-997-0821. And then for Center for New Medicine, just say you want to do something prevention, or you just want to make sure that you're in tip-top shape, that would be the Center for New Medicine, 949-867-6419. So thank you. Have a beautiful day, evening, wherever you are, because I know one of our patients from Malaysia was on there. So we are wishing you a beautiful health here on forward.
Thank you, guys.